What's up guys, Shawnthebro here, and today we're going to be going over combat flow and combo states part 2. Really, this also relates to the input buffer series. Essentially what we're going to be doing is we're going to be able to work on our input buffer to add these things called attack states. That's what I'm calling them. So like we have combo states, we can know exactly what our character is thinking, essentially, or what state they're in based on the game logic. Now, this is really, really important because we need to know, are they knocked down? Are they stunned? Low, mid, or high? That sort of stuff. We have that working. But we have something else that I've added now called attack state, which has none, startup, active, recovery. There's more, like cancelable or points where you can combo out, or in more specific cases, you might be able to perform a specific move out of that move. And all this logic can be actually boiled down to a few simple states that we add as an enum. And then in our AnimBP or wherever we're determining our move logic, we can just check against these rules. So these move states are going to come in handy in a lot of places, and they're also going to fix a current bug that we have in the series, which is where if you were to perform an attack and then perform a different attack, you see how the medium punch input is coming up in the input stack? That punch would normally come out after, because we had the buffered input episode. Now, buffered input is important. You want to be able to press inputs before a move is done to perform another move or to cancel into another move, but that does not mean you should be able to press it at any time and perform it. And that's how it is currently set up. However, with these attack states, we can very easily get rid of that issue and also still keep the integrity of everything in the input buffer and set us up for some future content as well. We'll go over some more of the future uses as we get into it, but let's get started today. So you can watch when I press an input. If you look at the attack state over on the right, it starts at none, but it goes to startup, active, recovery. This will work for all moves the way we're going to set it up, so you won't have to, go change all your moves and all that. We're going to change it in a few places, but it's going to work across the board. So let me show you a slower move where it's easier. Startup, active, recovery, and then back to default. Startup, active, recovery, back to default. Now, one additional thing I want to note before we start working on this is with the buffered input that I just talked about getting fixed. If you want to see what I mean about sometimes you want to be able to press an input toward the end of an attack and perform an action, well, you can do that. For example, we can use our attack state recovery here if you want that logic. Like if I say directional medium, and I go into recovery, and then I press my button, and I have to do a very specific time, then I can buffer that next input. See that? So once the hitbox goes away, I can buffer my next one. Now, you don't have to do that either. That's up to you, but some games do have it set up different ways where you have to be you have to be frame specific on when you press this, or it gives you a little bit of leniency. This sort of system can help you set that up. So even if you don't do it exactly how I do it here in the episode, you can probably get some ideas on how you might want to use that for ease of use or auto combos and things like that. But alright, so let's get into Combat Flow Part 2. We're going to start in the code today, and this is episode 104. So if you haven't watched any episodes of this series, or if you want to get caught up, here's the entire playlist right here. 103 episodes before it. We still have a very long way to go, but we're coming along quite well, and we're making good progress every week, so like I said, that's the playlist. I'll also link this episode right here, which is the first episode, to the input buffer, since we are going to be using the input buffer still for attacks and stuff, but it won't really come into play today specifically. It's just that we're going to be using that system to actually showcase what we do today. All right, so let's get into it. Now, as I said, we're adding an attack state today. So if you go to your base character, mine's fighter template character, I've added another enum, and I've called it E attack state. I have none, started, active, and recovery. Like I mentioned before, it is very possible you have others in here. Like we'll probably have cancelable states. So when the move or when the character's in, a certain frame range of an attack, they may have a cancelable state so that we know they can go to this move instead. Or they can go to this combo move, like, oh, there's 3 different moves I can perform in this combo that's set up by the game. Well, then we can say this is it. You're in the combo part. And we essentially actually have that with the logic we've already put in. We had booleans like can combo and stuff, and that will actually do that. That's really the point of that. But if you want to expand upon this enum, you can just update the logic. Instead of using that can combo boolean, you have an E attack combo or can combo state, and then if they're in that state and they press an input, you do the certain logic in the NMBP. The amount of freedom here is actually pretty awesome because you can change this to work with however you envision your system. We will be using it more in the future and we will be upgrading it. So if you want to just leave it like I have it for now, that's perfectly fine. I'll show you some more of the uses in other episodes. Just like how we had the input status, which was for Combat Flow Part 1, where we went over all the different types of button inputs and, press, release, and holds. We're doing basically the same thing here. We're setting up this logic now, and we can use it for a lot more stuff down the line. As with any enum we have to keep track of on a specific actor, we need to make a variable for it. So if you scroll down to where your variables are, I went to where all my states were because I have character state, combo state, and I made attack state. So obviously it's just a type of E attack state. I've called it attack state, and make sure it is available in the blueprint because we are going to have to set it in there. Since some moves, actually really all our moves, they could be different timings and things. We're going to have to rely on anim notifies, or if you have specific frame data, you could do it off frame data, but we don't have that in the system currently. So we're going to rely everything on the anim notify times. So we need it to be able to be seen in blueprint. Now, as always, it's a good idea to set this in the constructor, so you can set it to none by default with the others right here. Now, using this in code is going to be very, very simple today. We're really only going to use it in one spot, and quite frankly, it's not even the best spot to use it. Really, we should place it somewhere where it's going to eliminate all this buffer checking and checking for commands. But I'm not going to do that today because we have not set up what I want to do with cancels and additional combo help. And so since we don't have that stuff in there, I don't want to set us down the wrong path and try and implement things as kind of a hack. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm just going to flat out ignore commands if the attack state of the character is not none or in recovery. And that is how we fixed that issue where multiple attacks were coming out. So if you pressed, light attack and then you press medium at any point, then the medium attack would fire after the light. That was the issue. It's that whenever we pressed an input, the input buffer was saying, yep, I found a command, and it was performing the action at the earliest possible time. It was setting the boolean. Well, when we return to idle, the boolean then says, okay, I'm true, so then I can take the state and we go into the next move. To fix that, you can simply do this now. Before we start the command, make sure the attack state is either none or recovery. The recovery is only if you want that little bit of leniency so that they don't have to press it when the animation itself actually ends. So that's up to you. I like it better that way because specifically now, at least when I'm debugging, it does make it easier to actually perform different moves and sequences of moves and also watch the logic in the blueprint and in the editor. But it's one line, so you can always test both ways and see which one you like. And this is literally it, though. I haven't added anything else in here. In determine command to use, there's one if statement, and before the start command function gets called, which start command is what actually sets the boolean to be true to say, yes, the character is using this command right now. So we just basically limit that to only occur if the character's attack state is in, the range of these states that we want them to be able to do that from. Okay. And now we have to go into the blueprint because we actually have to capture all these points. So let's go into our characters animation blueprint. You have to do this for all characters that have different animation blueprints, or if you have a base NMBP, which is a little tricky and something you have to do custom, but it is possible. If you do end up doing that, you can do it in here. But either way, go to your character's animation blueprint. And there's some points we have to touch on. We haven't been in here in a while because we actually haven't updated anything in the animation blueprint in some time. So just to kind of remind you of the flow, this is our state machine. I know it's a little dirty. These right here are my commands. And then we also have directional attacks, which technically aren't in the command list. You could put them in there. However, I'm not checking like for frames in that case. Basically, I just check and see if the character state is like moving left or moving right, and they press this action, then they perform this attack. That's why I've left them out of the command list. But it does, you know, it'll probably benefit in the future to put them in there. I just haven't messed with them yet, but there's enough examples in all these commands that you could feel free to add them. It wouldn't be an issue. And so basically what happens is we have idle, and let's say light attack for the first one. We have this list of character commands, or this array of character commands, and we break the command to grab the boolean to determine if this is valid or not, basically if we've used this command or not. If we have, we're going to go into the light attack state. When we go in here, actually let me click on this first. When we take this transition, we're going to have a start transition event. It's going to have one or two custom transition events here. It's going to have either start potential X attack transition, or if I show you another example, it's going to have start attack transition. This start potential X attack transition does basically the same thing as the start attack transition, but it means I can cancel out into a potential X attack. Now, as I keep saying, with this new attack state system, you can actually set up cancels using the enum as opposed to this separate event. So it doesn't really matter for now, the difference, if you haven't already implemented it. But basically just know, this means we're going from idle to this command, and using whatever logic we have to transition between the two. This event just means that I also can cancel into an X attack, or, you know, some sort of special version of this attack. Regardless, they both are going to need the same logic, which is to start when this occurs, the attack is in startup. The character is in the startup phase of that attack. Startup just refers to the moment in time of an attack or move when the character is getting ready to be able to injure the opponent. They can't actually do it yet. It's kind of like where our proximity box spawns, but it's actually before that. It's the entire build up. So, just so you know, those two events are there, and this is as soon as this transition occurs. That is the right time to do it, because the transition time from idle to the attack being performed, it should be start up right away until the active hitbox is spawned, and then we want to say the attack is active. And this is all part of frame data, so you've probably heard of these terms. So if we go into the animation now, I have a bunch of anim notifies on here. A lot of this is not stuff that you need for now, especially these tests. These were actually just for me for something else, so don't worry about them. I'm going to leave them for now because I'm using them for frame data on my own. But what you'll probably have, if you've been following the series exactly, is you'll have a start. You'll have this can use X attack if it's one of your potential X attacks. And then you'll have an active, a can combo if it's a comboable attack, or you're able to combo out of it, and an ended. The most important ones are start, active, and ended. So what these represent are when the proximity box will be spawned, the active hitbox will be spawned, and when the active hitbox will be destroyed. Well, technically both the proximity and the active hitbox are destroyed if the proximity is still alive here, but that's a special note. Okay, so really this represents when the proximity box is spawned. This represents when the active hitbox is spawned and the character's active attack state goes into attack active. And the ended represents the recovery. This is when the active hitbox is gone and the character's attack state goes into attack recovery. Okay? So keep that in mind. And as we've been doing it in the series, every attack should have at least those 3 anim notifies. They can have a lot more, but those are the 3 that are most important. You can see my other attacks have them as well. They really all should have them. Maybe not projectiles and stuff. They could have them, and they are useful to have them, but they're actually a little bit more unique in the way we set them up, so they might not have those specific ones, depending on what you did. But, yeah, you just need these 3 more than anything, because those represent kind of where our states are going to be. Okay, so once you see that, good. Now you know where the states are coming from on this specific attack. Now let's look at the transition back. So light attack back to idle. It has a transition event called start transition event, or sorry, called end attack transition. And so what that transition does and what that event does is that's going to reset our attack state back to none, basically, or neutral. It's usually referred to. I'm just used to none from C++ enums or defaults and things like that. That's what I'm used to calling them. But it's really setting the character's attack state back to neutral. So this end attack transition will, it does everything else already. This is something that already exists in the series, but it's going to reset our attack state so that we don't go into another attack afterward. Okay. Now let's go into our event graph, and let's go to those events that I pointed out, and we'll go to each of them one at a time. So first things first, let's go to the start attacks. So we have start potential X attack transition, and we have these start attack and start throw transitions. Really, right now, start attack and start throw are the same, but they could differ in certain ways, so they are different at the moment. But really, we're focused on these three events at the moment. So I'm not going to go over everything in this because I'm only changing one node in each of these, and that's setting the attack state. But just to give you a general flow of how this is working, this is when idle first picks up and says, I have to move to, let's say, light punch. So light punch is going to trigger. We're going to stop the character from moving. We actually reset the command values to make sure that it doesn't like try and loop or go into another state to cancel out of it, because we don't want that to occur. We just started this one. And then we're going to set the attack startup. You need the character reference, but you should have that in here. And then you just do set attack state. And then you'll get this node right here. And then you can pick. And this is startup, because this is when the character is locked into this move, but they're not able to injure the opponent yet. They're definitely not in recovery, because they haven't done the active yet. Okay. And then I bring it into the same stuff that I always have, which is to reset the variables afterward. So it resets any buttons that were pressed by the player. And it clears hitboxes. Again, stuff that's not really important for this specific episode, just things that we had earlier in the series and that we've done for other reasons. Now, potential X attack is the same. It has to reset variables first based on how it was set up. And then we do this stuff, which is to, like I said, reset the commands that were used and make sure we don't go into other commands. And then we also set the character state to be attack startup. And then we clear any existing hitboxes, just because if there were any lingering hitboxes or if anything got canceled, we want to make sure we get rid of them. All right, so those are those. That's all the starts. So that deals with startup. We need to deal with active, recovery, and end still. Since end is right here, and I've always put them next to each other, we can go over them now. I had end throw, end jump, and end attack different. But again, they all do the same. It's just that they could be different if you have any other logic you want to add in there. For me, they're all the same. So I set can move to be true because they're returning to the default state. In which case, I set the attack state to be none. They have finished, whatever it is that they are doing, whether it's an attack or a throw, which is a type of attack. But basically, they finished that animation. They're returning to idle now. That's when these get called, remember. End attack transition actually gets called right here, from light attack back to idle. So our attack state is actually none at this point because we're not doing any sort of attack. We're back in the neutral state for the character. Of course, it still has to be brought into the regular nodes that we had at the end of it. So don't forget that. Now that deals with all starts and all ends. But let's look at all of the anim notifies, like I said. So here is the start notify. So this notify is the one that spawns the proximity box. You can see I haven't changed any of the logic with the proximity box, because if the proximity box is being created, we don't have to do anything specific with the attack state. Startup already fires as soon as it transitions from idle to that attack. And active, the next state, doesn't fire and doesn't become true until the active hitbox is spawned. So the proximity box, good. Now we have the ended, which is the recovery. and we have the active. Let's actually go to the active first, just so we can stay in the correct order. So we have a function for that one. My nodes look like this, where I have the notify. So like this is my medium right, and here's my rifle punch, which is my light attack. And I call a function called create active hitbox, and it takes in all these parameters so that we know, what it is that we are spawning and doing with these hitboxes. So I go into my function, create active hitbox, and at the very end, I haven't changed any of this. There's a lot going on in this function. But at the very end, right before the return, I just set attack state to be active. So I grab my character reference, set attack state, and say attack active. The active hitbox is being spawned right now. In fact, it just did in like the almost previous node. And so we are in the active state. We can now hurt the opponent. Because of that, we want to set our attack state to that. And that one's really simple. That's actually all you have to do. You can close out that function when you're ready. And that will work for everywhere you use this create active hitbox. Now the last one we have is the recovery. And so we want to do that when each individual move goes into its recovery. I know it's a little bit confusing because we have like attack end, or end attack, end jump, end throw up here. And that's where we were doing none. That's when the animation actually transitions back to idle. But these attack name ends, so like rifle punch, which is like light punch ended, or medium right ended, that's this one right here. This is like recovery. This is where, okay, the attack is winding down. We're reverting back to idle. So we have all these frames to do that still. And we can no longer damage our opponent. The hitbox is actually cleared on this notify, the active hitbox. So at that point, we want to go into our recovery because we still can't move or anything. We have to wait until we return to idle. So all these endings, again, they could be separate. For now, they all do the same thing. They all link to the same place, but I made them separate for each move in case anyone wanted to do separate logic with them, and we may make them unique in the future. But for now, while we're still going over all the basic logic in the game and making everything work, no problems here. So the basic logic is, once we go into recovery, we can no longer combo. We have no longer landed a hit. We're resetting that for things like an actual combo counter and also combo logic. If it's more than just one combo, you may need to know if a hit was landed or if multiple hits were landed before you could perform it. That's being reset as well. Those were reset in previous episodes. And then we clear the hitboxes, of course, because we no longer want the active hitbox or the proximity hitbox, if it's still around for any reason, to be there. But the last thing we do that I've added in here, we technically do other stuff. This is for just entrances, just to make sure that if anything fires here, we don't actually allow the character to move during the entrance. But that's not related to now. The thing that we have to add here is that our character reference attack state must be set to attack recovery at this point. Okay? I would do it before this branch. You don't have to. This branch will only be false if the entrances aren't finished, so really these notifies should never fire. But there's no reason to do this additional check to perform this action, so I just put it outside of it, but it doesn't really matter. Just make sure that it's in this line of logic. Now, once you do this, let's go over this again as we wrap up this episode here. Once you do this, make sure that everything looks good in your actual game, because just in case your anim notifies were different than mine, or you called yours different things, or if I didn't explain it as well, let's make sure everything's as it should be. So if you click on your character and it shows you a little highlight around the actor that you're clicking on, it should be the name of your class. I have 2 mutants in right now, but you can see mutant BP1 is the one on the right. So mutant BP is the one on the left for me, which is player 1, which is the one I'm going to be doing this with. Now, so if you click on them, you can scroll down in the class details here. And it'll be under whatever you called it, really. Like in code, I put up, if I scroll down here to attack state, you can see I put the category as character details. So in the editor, it will pop up in the character details section here. But you can put it wherever you want. It doesn't matter. Just make sure that you find this. You can also search for it. Find your attack state. And just watch this value as you perform an action. Again, a simple light attack. You can see it goes to startup, active, and recovery. It's quick. You know, it's very quick. But it does it. And if I press like medium in there, you can see medium does not fire. Now, if I were to press it in the recovery state, which it's hard because this is... There we go. So you saw I could press medium in the recovery state and actually transition directly into the light attack. That was not a transition. That was, though. So you have to get it very specific frames, but it allows that little bit of leniency. If I do it with a slower attack, you can see it's very easy. So you can see that it's not firing if I do it before. That I did after. So it's not firing if I do it before, but if I do it after the hitbox goes away, I should be able to perform it. There we go. I have to make sure it's in recovery. Yeah. So there you go. Yeah, you can see how that could be useful and how you can watch our attack state and see what state it actually goes into. You can see even the moves we haven't specifically looked at yet, like this is back in medium, startup, active, recovery, still has all the same stuff. So this gets applied across the board and it's very convenient. Now, something else you can use for this in the future, we are going to use this, but just to show you that this has multiple uses, let's go into Versus to show off some of the other uses of this before we wrap up here. So we have the, you know, all the things about actually just making the attack state work so that we can see the different, you know, we can do different things with our attacks and we can also make it cleaner and a better experience for the user. But let's look at other instances of this. So if I were to attack, you can see that even though player 2 gets hit first, I'm attacking with both players here. But player 2 gets hit first, but he still performs his attack after. Really, unless this is a move with super armor or some sort of power through, they should be able to, you know, their attack should be canceled or nulled out because they got hit. So they should go to the stun state instead. There's two things we'll need to do for that. Feel free to start looking at it now if you'd like. But really, you're going to need a transition from your attack to the stun. And then you're going to need to set up the rule to set it to go there and to cancel the attack you're doing immediately. That's something that's very important in fighting games and something that we never actually were able to implement in our college project. So you could just spam away and keep fighting. But it is really useful, and these attack states can accomplish that. Because you'll know exactly what state you're in when you were hit, and you'll know, oh, I don't want to be in this state anymore. I want to transition out, and I have to free up storage space. So anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed, please subscribe. It does more for myself and the channel than anything else you can do, and I really appreciate it. I'm going to give a huge shout out to my YouTube membership and Patreon supporters and subscribers. Thank you guys so much for everything you've done to support this channel and myself. I really appreciate it, and it helps me out more than you know. If you did have any issues with this tutorial or any of the tutorials in the series or any of my episodes really, then feel free to join the Discord community. I'll be happy to help you out. It's completely free, and we'll get you situated. Anyway, guys, like I said, that's all I got. So thank you so much for watching. I'm Shawnthebro, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye, guys.